Alright, so in this video we'd like to talk about the important rendering settings of the fluids. So before we begin with that, I will just like to show you with some small changes that we did with the fluid container, especially in terms of the opacity. We have just tweaked and changed the graph, and with this change we have got significant change inside the sharpness and the aggressiveness of the fluids. So I highly encourage all of you to maintain with this graph and with this workflow. Alright, and to support that I also do have got the play blast for you, and just want you to have a look at that. So in this new play blast you can see the fire is seems to be a little bit more aggressive and more sharper. And if you just remember that I told you once, if we're gonna increase this graph towards the right hand sections, then we're gonna have the stronger fluids over there. Well, that's completely okay, not a problem. But with these stronger fluids, they're also going to cause, you could say, some kind of the blobbiness, or you can say the jelly nature inside the file, that is taking the final output of the render a little bit away from the realistic look and feel of the aggressive file. So what I've tried to do is that instead of taking that graph towards the right hand sections, we could get the graph over here as much as close we can do, but without interfering to the topmost point. So with this, we can have some more gaps inside the fluids. That will really gonna bring some more turbulence as well as the aggressiveness, and also gonna avoid the smooth flowing nature of the fluids. Alright, so I believe so guys, this is pretty much easy, and you could also able to do that thing. That is quite just an easy task. Alright, and with these changes we also would like to address one more thing, that I've just a little bit tweaked the graph of the incandescence. Earlier it was something like that, and here you can see with this we also do have some some sharp fall off of the colors, which I really don't want. What I am looking here is that the color of the orange should be more close towards the black sections, so that with this you could have more space and area for the fire, and that will going to create some more aggressiveness. All right, so instead of this you are required to shift the graph towards the left hand sections. All right, that is pretty much okay. And the last thing is that we do have the input bias set that to maybe 0.275 or zero point 0.3. So here in this case what I have did is that I've just tweaked the value a little bit more. Instead of the 0.3 or maybe 0.25 or maybe 0.275, I would like to take that thing to the 0.325. That would be the final and the last value. Alright, but I also do encourage you to change these things and to take some different reviews, to take some different renders, and that will really gonna help you out. All right, so with this we would like to move next towards the rendering sections. So the rendering section of the fluid is really going to be interesting, as you have already did some lot of hard works in your previous modules. We have already created the fluids, we have understood the science of the density, velocity, temperature sections. We also dealt with the ammeter of the fluids and many other things. But now in this sections we would like to take down the rendering that will really gonna help us in establishing the beautiful compositions of the image. Alright, so first we would like to create the rendering layer system so that we can sample out the things according to our scene and the production pipelines. So here in this case I'm taking a very simple approach towards the rendering. Under the layer editor over here, what we can do, we can just start creating the new layers for the rendering. So under the layer, just go and click the create the empty layer. In the beginning it is showing me with the master layer. That means the default layer that Maya has already created, and the master layer is containing all the scene elements inside this. So we're not going to disturb the master layer, we're going to create the new layer that will going to take the informations of our rendering. So with the layer 1, if I'm gonna click, you can notice that there is nothing inside the viewport because this layer is pretty much empty. It's almost empty, I can say. So let me just gonna double click that up, and let's say we're gonna name that thing to the fluid underscore let's say beauty. Okay, that's pretty much okay. Now what we're gonna do here is that we're gonna select the fluid container, click the fluid underscore beauty, and right click, and let's say add selected objects. So obviously the fluid container is now added inside the new layer, and now this is ready to be get rendered. Okay, if I'm gonna take you over here, you can see that there is nothing inside the container but only except the fire. So where's the rest information? So for that we also need to go back to the master layer, and now we need to select the tree, and again come over here, let's say right click, add selected objects to the existing layer. So now what we can do is that we do have the tree as and the fluid, both these elements inside one single layer. So we need to take the render of the fluids. Alright, so before we begin with that, let's just do one thing. We'll first understand the concepts of some shaders. Okay, now one thing is pretty much clear. We need to take out the render of the fluids. So for the render of the fluids, I also want that tree to be get completely, secluded, or you can say separated from the fluids, because we're only going to render the fluids, not the tree. The tree has to be get separately rendered. All right, so with that, what we need to do here is that we just need to go inside the hypershade, and we need to click the use background shader. Well, the use background shader will going to provide the masking informations for those elements that are coming in front of the fluids, and also going to hide the informations. It's a highly useful utility. Not the utility, I can say it's the shader, I'm sorry. And the shader is highly recommended to take out the important renders, when you can see here completely that the tree is, certain section of the tree is coming in front of the fluid, and certain section of the tree is behind the fluid. So if I'm gonna take out the rendering of the fluids, I do need to have these informations completely separate from the rendering. So for that, the use background is completely acceptable. And here in this case, the use background, just click the Control A. You have certain attributes like the specular color, so we do not have. So what we can do is that we can just turn off the reflectivity, since we are not going to cast out any reflections, so there is no use. You can put that thing to the 0. And again, we do not have any reflection, so we can put that thing to 0. The shadow mask is completely required in the case when we are looking forward to create the shadows, but in this case we're just only going for the masking information, so you can just reduce that also. Okay, and in case to provide another color, I can change the specular color, let's say to the green, so that it shouldn't interfere with the background. And once it is selected, you can select the tree and can say right click, assign material to the viewport selections. So with this, your tree is pretty much okay. That's completely cool. And what we're going to do here, we can start taking the single frame for the rendering purpose. But there is one issue. Well, if you remember, we do discuss with you regarding the displacement approximations. The displacement approximations basically is the technique that will going to help in getting the most realistic details on the mesh with the help of the grayscale map. Alright, but now the case is that we do have the displacement approximation editor assigned to the tree, but we do not have the shader for that. Well, the biggest issue is that, let me just gonna hide the fluid to speed my workflow. The big issue is that if I'm gonna render out these informations, the problem will be in my diffuse pass. When I have the render of the tree, it will gonna look something like this, which is, you can see in front of me here, the tree is showing some nice silhouettes, and there's a change inside the branches of the tree, which is basically we did inside the mud box, and now the tree is getting a little bit displaced. Alright, but what if I'll just only render out, let's say we have the 0 divisions, or let's say even we have the divisions but we do not have the map provided. So what is going to happen is that if I'm going to take the renders, well, first of all, nothing will gonna come, because this shader will gonna act as the background. But with this information, I can see little more things, and that is the tree is coming completely straight. There isn't any detail information if you're gonna compare with the help of the previously generated render image. Here you can see, if you're going to go inside the alpha, you can notice that there is a strong changes inside the surface of the tree. Now for the displacement shader, or you can say for the use background utility to provide that kind of displacement, we also need to provide the displacement utility to the use background. So let's just very quickly assign this. I'm going to go inside the hypershade, and that's a fairly easy process, not going to be a very challenging thing, guys. So we can go inside the use background. We do have the displacement shader, and we have already created the displacement utility. So you just need to just drop it down over here. The displacement will go inside the displacement shader, all right, and which has also been assigned with the texture, which you can see. And the texture you can fetch under the texture sections. We do have the tree displacement over here, which is basically the 32-bit EXR files, all right. So if I'm gonna select all these three things and go inside the input output connections, you're gonna see that there is a lot of bunch of the input nodes, because the displacement is not only provided to the use background, it has been provided to the ambient occlusions, to the diffuse pass, and many other informations. So I'm gonna select the tree and the displacement and click the input. That is pretty much fine. All right. So now the case is that use background utility has been provided with the displacement map. So now if I'm gonna take the render of the tree, you're gonna see some changes. So let me just gonna hit the render, and let's see some few more changes. Absolutely great. So now in this case, you can see that instead of the plain surfaced area of the tree, you can start experiencing the silhouettes and the changes inside the surface. All right, so now we can say that the fluids are pretty much ready to go for the render. All right, so let me just gonna go back inside the final camera and unhide the fluids. So with this, the fluids are completely ready to go for the render. And since we are not utilizing the real world lighting for the fluids, being an incandescence object, so we don't need these information. So I do have the real lights information completely switched off. Okay, and I also need to hide the lighting informations from this case. Let's say Control H, and frankly we do not have anything inside the rendering layers also, so we are not bothered about that. So the case is that now we are completely set for this thing. Now it's time to move to the next clip.